At one point, the mother of 3 took to TikTok with her guitar, hoping someone might be able to help them.
Surgery was only $42,000. They put a price tag on my husband's life, and they decided he wasn't worth $42,000.
How desperate did you feel in those moments?
It doesn't get more desperate than opening up your guitar case and standing in front of a hospital in 100-degree weather in Houston.
Well, it's no secret that Americans across the aisle are disillusioned with our nation's healthcare system, but a new poll has found that when asked who or what is to blame for the assassination of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, roughly 7 in 10 Americans said it was denials for healthcare coverage as well as the prioritization of profits by these insurance companies. But while many Americans can agree that healthcare in the US is a problem, there are differing ideas on how to address that problem. Cenk, what do you think? Are you optimistic that Americans can find some kind of common ground here? If anywhere, it seems like it'd be here.
Yeah, well, I hope so. But the number one thing we have to make sure of is that we don't shut down the conversation because someone started it in the most wrong way imaginable. So there's thoughts about that in the poll as well. But let's come back and figure out how to solve it after Yaz gives you the details of the story.
Yeah, so in the survey out of the University of Chicago, nearly 8 in 10 Americans said that Luigi Mangione was also at fault, but apparently a few things can be true at once, at least in the eyes of the majority of Americans. Another factor that Americans believe led to the assassination was wealth and income inequality. But notably, they did not find political divisions or the media to be as significant as factors. And speaking of political divisions, as they pertain to healthcare in this country, Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders is hopping aboard the Make America Healthy Again train, but his plan to do so looks a little different from what we've been seeing from prominent right-wing figures such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Elon Musk. Bernie said in a Christmas Eve post on X, "In the wealthiest country on earth, let us make America healthy again. We should be leading the world in terms of life expectancy, happiness, and productivity." So while RFK Jr. seems convinced that he will somehow be able to convince Americans to eat better and exercise more, and while Elon Musk thinks that everyone who's overweight should just get on Ozempic, Bernie's plan seems to be a little bit more rooted in reality. His plan, which he says is just a start, includes Medicare for all, lower costs for prescription medications, paid family and medical leave, reformation of the food industry, raising the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour, lowering the work week from 40 hours to 32 hours with no decrease in pay, combating national epidemics of loneliness, isolation, and mental illness, addressing climate change and the environmental crisis, and creating a high-quality public education system. In Bernie's statement, he criticized the healthcare industry for some of the things that were brought up in the survey, such as how the healthcare industry prioritizes profits over people. He seemed in alignment with RFK Jr. on the point about cleaning up the nation's food supply, but he also discussed several factors that seemingly never come up in solutions proposed by the right. Bernie seems to understand that our collective mental health is a factor in our collective physical health, and the various stresses in our modern society often inflict the things, that's just not healthy for us, right? Overall, it's contributing to a lower quality of life for Americans. And these aren't simple changes that Bernie is proposing either. He's saying that we need to overhaul the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries. He's saying we need to rethink the ways in which we organize communities and societies overall. We need to rethink our national values in some way, specifically where they pertain to work coming before our health and our families, infrastructural changes that need to happen. But these things aren't easy to come by, despite the bipartisan agreement that we all need help in this aspect. The people in our government are the same people who are benefiting from this current system, so it's very hard to change these things. Cenk, I feel like there is some hope in all of this. I know so many conservatives won't like a lot of the things that Bernie is proposing, but maybe, as you said, they should really be open to it.
No, I actually think that the voters would like a lot of what Bernie's proposing, including the tons and tons of right-wing voters, and they're showing that in the reaction to the killing here. So I'm going to come to Bernie in a second, but first on the poll. So again, as Yaz said, don't get it twisted. 78% of Americans say that they're primary thing responsible for the killing is the killer, Mangione, and that is correct. It should be 100%.
Well, I was going to say 78% is a ridiculous number for that.
I mean, that's pretty low given that, but it was the highest number out of all the things that they asked about. And so, yeah, it should be 100, but at the same time, it's at least the highest. Okay, so, but then the second part where they didn't blame political division much, it was at 48%. That's actually, again, the American people are right, because the division is not the problem here. Unity is the problem. Corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans don't want to fix this. They're 95% of Congress, and their unity in supporting the donor class is exactly why we have the problem in the first place. And then finally, obviously the main thing we started with, denials for healthcare coverage is at 69%, so comes in barely number two to Mangione. And that is why the American people are pissed. That's why I think a lot of right-wingers would agree with Bernie's plan. Bernie's plan is productive. Instead of just randomly killing someone, it actually proposes a fix to the system, which Mangione obviously didn't do. That didn't, his assassination didn't fix the system 1%. In fact, it made one person have a lot less health, right? So it went backwards, not forwards. But Bernie's saying this is how you do it, and his proposals are very, very popular. Now, what's interesting is Bernie's proposals will go nowhere. Like, look, I know Biden doesn't have much time, but even if he had all the time in the world, he wouldn't have proposed those. I know why. He had 4 years and didn't propose them. And then Trump is not going to propose them because they all are going to do what the donors told him to do. The health insurance donors, the drug company donors. There's one reason why healthcare is so messed up in this country, and that's because of our money in politics situation. Because those industries that are deeply corrupt can just simply purchase all of Congress. And then the problem never gets fixed because of that bribery. Michael.
Yeah, I mean, it's greed, and it's the greed of politicians, right? I mean, so everything they do is dictated by the donors and the money. I mean, I shouldn't say that, not everything. A lot of what they do is, and I do think that there are people who do things in spite of the fact that they have to raise money and often don't get that money and often don't win because they don't, but are in there fighting for ideals that they believe in. Bernie Sanders is certainly an example of someone like that. So I think, going back to what you were talking about, Luigi, Cenk, I think that, yeah, he killed somebody, and it's horrific, and he should spend the rest of his life in jail if he's found guilty because of what he did. But I don't think it shuts down a conversation. I think if there is a silver lining, it's that he started a conversation that many people have been having in fractured ways for a very long time, and now the country is talking about it. Does that mean that that the system's going to change? No, but I certainly think it's going to be part of the conversation on reforms that they have to do within their own industry. I think that it's going to have some pencil pusher who isn't a computer, should that exist, in the healthcare world, who doesn't deny a claim, who has that sitting in the back of their mind, what happened in New York. So I think that there will be some positive, just the fact that it's being talked about in an enduring way, right? I'm not here to say that Luigi Mangione is this great American. He's a murderer. But from that murder has come a conversation that we're sitting here on December 27th having, when it happened several weeks ago. So I do think that's important. But like you said, with Sanders and what he's saying, as compelling as it all is, and I think Sanders' lists are always too long. I think everything he says is right, or nearly everything he says is right. One of the things that's worked against Bernie Sanders is that his lists are always too long. When you look at what Donald Trump does, and does to great effect, he does it in 3 words about 3 things, and he says it over and over and over again. And Sanders, I think, in retrospect, would probably have been served best by doing that when he was running, and certainly when he was in elected office during a Democratic presidency. That doesn't mean that it would have changed what the president did, because as Cenk said, the president didn't do those things, and he had 4 years to do them, or certainly a period of time to do them.
Yeah.
And one thing that Yas said, which I also thought was interesting, is when we talk now about right-wing figures like RFK Jr., I wonder if he knows what he's done to himself to put himself after that qualifier. Right-wing figures like RFK Jr.
Yeah. Well, look, that might have been sounded crazy a year or 2 ago, but now I think he knows.
No, but I'm saying that's what I'm saying. It would have sounded crazy at any other time in history, and now he's kind of embracing that in a way. But it's a remarkable thing that there's nothing shocking about how Yaz described him as a right-wing figure, because that's what he is on this issue.
So let me agree with Michael in a couple ways. So number one, I think he's right that the healthcare companies now will do a little release valve when the pressure builds up too much. That's what they do. So there'll be less. My prediction is there'll be less denials for a year or two, and then they'll go right back to where they were once things settle down. Because it's the inevitability of maximizing profit. That's why this industry should not be one where you maximize profit. Jeans, burgers, no problem, okay? But when it's cops or fire department or health insurance, the government has to provide a bare minimum. Now, to his point about Bernie's list being too long, I totally agree. Because here you have, look, let's take just 3 of these. Reform the food industry, that's interesting, and there'll be some agreements and disagreements within there. Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, no disagreements, massively popular. You've heard me talk about it ad nauseum, 84% popularity, could pass easily if either party just lifted one finger. They could pass it tomorrow. So they're all liars, it's super clear. And then lower the work week to 32 hours. Wait, where'd that come from? Like, A, I don't even agree with that, but B, that's okay. What I would love is an actual democracy where a proposal like this is discussed in the whole media, mainstream media, social media, online shows. It's discussed in Congress, and then we battle over what parts of the food industry regulations we should do or not do. We decide against 32-hour work week, but we decide in favor of paid family leave. Wouldn't that be amazing? And that's what democracy is supposed to be. But none of that will happen.
Right, and Bernie gives you beef stew and Trump gives you a steak. And there's something great about beef stew, and you can like every ingredient in it. But when it's presented to you as a steak, it's just a lot more easily sort of grasped by the people. And I agree with just about everything on that list. I also think the 32-hour work week is regressive. I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, and if to Michael's point, sorry, last thing, if he just focused on paid family leave, he might be able to pass that. Even though he's out of power, even though he has no one to support him in either party on that, it's so overwhelmingly popular. Boil it down to one thing, win on that, build leverage, and go to the next thing.
Bingo.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat, emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.